talking about a lot today, and we may as well kick it off with the first and most obvious issue confronting the timetable, Steve, is the impeachment follies. President Trump, former President Trump, is now setting a precedent as a no longer serving official that will be impeached anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, impeachment follies is exactly right, because you can't impeach someone who's no longer in office. Impeachment is reserved under the Constitution for someone, a currently serving official, whether it be the president or a federal judge or any office holder. So the proceedings are quite clearly illegal. I mean, the mental image people should call to mind when they think about the upcoming impeachment proceedings is they should remember back at last year's State of the Union address, when Nancy Pelosi viciously behind President Trump took his speech and tore it up. She basically is standing in the well of the Senate as she stood in the well of the House along with Chuck Schumer, and they're tearing up the Constitution as we watch, because this is a clear violation of the Constitution. That's why the chief presiding officer of the sham impeachment will not be, as the Constitution calls for, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts. He wants nothing to do with this. He sent over his regrets. He didn't issue any other comment aside from that, sadly, but he said, regretfully, I will not be able to sit in this impeachment trial. And so they're going to have one of their own, Senator Patrick Leahy, who will be the presiding judge. And Leahy has already indicated he's going to vote for impeachment. So there you have it. You have all the conditions for a Star Chamber proceeding. You have a complete violation of the founding charter of the United States, the Constitution. You have a judge who because of prejudice should recuse himself, but won't. And you have false charges being brought. So this is nothing but, set up the circus tent, because the circus is in town.
I have a proposition that if there is going to be a precedent set, I've got a few nominees for the next impeachments. Historically, I guess along the timeline, I'd start with Woodrow Wilson for his wars to save, to end all wars. Franklin Roosevelt deserves impeachment for handing 100 million Europeans to Stalin for 50 years after World War II at Yalta. LBJ started stealing elections in 1948 in South Texas. He bragged about it for years. And of course, we have the Clintons, the how many, I wonder. And then we have, of course, the Obama team that started the Russia hoax and directed it from the Obama White House and planted the seeds for it in the Obama Justice Department, which has never been prosecuted, investigated. The only individual convicted was just given no prison term by an Obama judge. So we know where the entire impeachment folly is going to lead, and we're in for some rough times. Speaking of rough times, I think there is a terrible persecution, genocide going on in the Uyghur portion of China that I want you to talk about, because most Americans have never heard of it.
Yeah, people should become familiar with this ongoing genocide, because it's happening in real time right now. We often say with regard to Hitler's genocide, attempted genocide of the Jews, the Holocaust, that we will never allow it to happen again. The civilized world simply won't tolerate that kind of thing. Well, we're quote unquote tolerating it now because it's happening in real time in Western China. And it's happening to a Chinese minority called the Uyghurs. This is a Turkish-speaking people. The easternmost, I think, of the remaining Turkish tribes. The westernmost are in Turkey. The easternmost are in the stands, and then in China itself. And they've lived in the far west of China, the Gobi Desert area, since time immemorial. They've been there for a couple thousand years. China now because of a ruling by the supreme leader of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, General Secretary of the Central Military Commission, he has decided that the Uyghurs are to be exterminated. And they are going about it as rapidly as they can. And the extermination is taking place in using 4 different processes. The first is that you lock up all the men and some of the women in concentration camps. Of course, you don't feed them and clothe and provide them shelter in the concentration camps for free. You make them work. And so you're setting up factories next to the concentration camps that produce goods for export to the United States. One more reason why we should not be buying anything made in China. Boycott Chinese made goods, period. Don't buy anything in China if you can help it. I know this is not an easy road to hoe because in many lines of goods, the only things you can find on the store shelves are goods made in China. And the sad news, of course, is that now that that Joe Biden is in the Oval Office, the big box stores, the Walmarts and other places that were looking for alternative suppliers away from China under the Trump administration are now starting to place orders with China suppliers again. So we as consumers, I think, have to boycott goods made in China because you never know whether or not the good you're purchasing, whether it be a cotton shirt or some other cheap consumer item, is made by Uyghurs in concentration camps or by, slave labor in other parts of China or by even Chinese workers who, because they're not allowed to strike for higher wages, because they're not allowed to organize into free labor unions, are effectively serfs and have to work and do the bidding of the communist officials who keep them busily working away, busy little bees on the Chinese assembly lines, churning out consumer products for the world. So, boycott goods made in China. But back to the Uyghurs, concentration camps with factories attached, long hours, 7 days a week, 70 hours a week at your sewing machine or, sewing clothes or whatever you're doing. Then in the evening, you have study sessions where you're forced to learn Chinese, forced to learn the sayings of Xi Jinping. Now, these are not study sessions you can sleep through, because if you fail your exam, if you're not able to quote Xi Jinping in this week's lesson, if you haven't memorized it, you're given a different color of shirt to wear, and you're tortured as a result. Now, if you fail it twice, you're given a second color, and if you fail it 3 times, you're given, I think the color, I'm not sure what the color is, but you're given a color that identifies you as someone who has failed their ideological lessons, failed their brainwashing sessions, and you're treated even worse. You're denied food, for example. So there's real torture going on in the prison camps as well. People being beaten. We just had a report from the BBC on systematic gang rape in these concentration camps of young Uyghur women who are, after they are forced to work all day, they're taken out at night, chained to beds, and then gang raped by the Chinese guards. So this is awful stuff that's happening in China. It's happening in real time, locking up the men, some of the women, mistreating them, torturing them. They built a crematorium, Chris, right next to one of the concentration camps, so they can dispose of the bodies easily of the people who are being tortured to death. As for the women and children left behind, the children are being sent to boarding schools where they're taught to speak, read, and write Chinese and not their own language or culture. And the women who are left behind in the homes are being aborted and sterilized under China's vicious one-child policy, which no longer applies to the Han Chinese. They're being encouraged to have children. But the Uyghur women are being told, no, you have to stop at 1 or 2. And the Uyghur women who are left alone at home often have Chinese police billeted with them, and everyone understands what that means. So it is genocide in real time. Now, here we have a situation where the outgoing administration, in the person of Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, declared that China was committing genocide in Eastern Turkestan, Xinjiang as the Chinese call it, against the Uyghurs. This is a formal declaration of genocide. It has legal consequences in terms of the sanctions of the officials responsible, in terms of the goods that may be produced in these areas in concentration camps. Now, during his confirmation hearing, the incoming Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, said he thought that the genocide declaration against the Chinese Communist Party that runs China was correct. He thought it was appropriate. But the big question in my mind is this: will they actually do anything about it? Will they actually enforce the laws that now come into play when you have a formal declaration of genocide? And I'm not sanguine about this. I wish I could be more optimistic. But the overarching policy now of the Biden administration towards China, and this won't surprise you, is one of what they call strategic patience. What is strategic patience? Well, it kind of reminds me of accommodation, or another word for that would be appeasement. I think we had strategic patience under the Obama-Biden administration, and strategic patience was what forced us to stand idly by while the islands in the South China Sea were created out of sand and concrete and militarized into floating, into unsinkable aircraft carriers. We had strategic patience as China, for example, went to the Senkaku Islands, which belonged to Japan, and constantly incursed around those islands and claimed them for themselves. We had strategic patience as they built up their military vis-a-vis Taiwan and constantly threatened to invade it. Strategic patience is not how you deal with an expansive, aggressive, communist dictatorship, which is really behaving aggressively towards all points of the compass.
Well, one of the places that Biden is being aggressive is domestic with regard to abortion and its international funding, as well as in the United States, opening up financial funnels to pro-abortion groups worldwide, as well as to Planned Parenthood here at home. We've noted that as a genocide over the years because it is so rampant and millions have died because of it. Where does the Biden administration stand with regard to approaching the genocide here at home? Are they neutral? Are they going to be patient? Are they going to be strategic at all? What's their plan?
Well, no, there's no there's no patience, strategic or otherwise, when it comes to promoting abortion. President Biden or his wife Jill have already signed dozens of executive orders, including orders that will ensure that Planned Parenthood in the United States is refunded, including an order that will reinstitute the Mexico City, that will do away with the Mexico City policy and reinstitute the policy of the Obama-Biden administration of funding abortion overseas. This is a policy that, I don't know, the polls generally show that 2/3 or more of Americans think is a very bad idea. The idea that our tax dollars, your tax dollars and mine, should be going to places like India, or should be going to places like Nigeria to pay for abortions, to kill little Indians or little Nigerians, I think is reprehensible. I think most Americans find it abhorrent to be involved in complicit in any way in paying for or enabling abortions. But once they do away, as they have now with the Mexico City policy, we will be funding abortions overseas through groups like the International Planned Parenthood Federation, through other groups like Marie Stopes, the big UK abortion provider, which is very active in Africa and other former British colonies. And we will also be, our tax dollars will also be spent lobbying for the legalization of abortion overseas, so that we go into a country where pro-life sentiment is very strong. And we say to the people of Kenya, you've got it all wrong. We're going to tell you what your law should be concerning the unborn. We're going to fund programs to promote and lobby for the legalization of abortion in your country. This actually happened under the Obama-Biden administration, where then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton spent, I believe the correct number was $25 million of US tax money lobbying for the legalization of abortion in Kenya. I thought we were supposed to be in the business, Chris, of promoting democracy overseas. Democracy means that the people in a sovereign country get to decide for themselves what their laws should be and not be told by Western imperialists. I guess we should call them contraceptive imperialists or abortion imperialists, what their laws should be. But we did that under Clinton, under Obama, and now it looks like we're going to be doing that again. That certainly does not help us to win friends and influence policy in places around the world where we go into countries that are pro-life and pro-family and try to overturn long-standing laws which prohibit abortion, which define the family as a man and a woman and their natural and adopted children. This is cultural imperialism. I thought the left was supposed to be opposed to this sort of thing.
Well, the next step in the United States for pro-lifers is certainly not to support or even attempt to persuade or engage in dialogue President Joe Biden. And I think perhaps the states might be the focal point and localities of our efforts. A lot of states are proceeding with pro-life legislation that the courts and not the administration will adjudicate when they're brought before the courts in lawsuits from the usual suspects. Where do you see that possibility, and what should pro-lifers in the United States be thinking and doing in the next 4 years?
Well, clearly we can't sit back and let someone else take the burden of fighting this fight. And the thing about people with pro-life and pro-family views is this: people of faith, people who value the United States of America as a democratic republic. Those people don't like to focus on politics all the time. They like to think about politics for a few days or a few weeks before an election, elect someone to represent their views in Washington or at the state capitol, and then go on about their lives, because they have lives. They have obligations, mass obligations to their church. They have obligations to their family. They have families, they have children, and they have obligations, in other areas as well. But now we all need to get engaged. We need to stay engaged from now until the midterms in 2022. We need to stay engaged until the next presidential election in 2024. And we need to stay engaged in large part to fight for unborn children at the state level and at the local level. Crisis pregnancy centers are going to be very, very important in the years to come, as Planned Parenthood beefs up its efforts to promote abortion and to perform more abortions. So support your local crisis pregnancy center. We at PRI are working overseas to provide, for example, ultrasounds to crisis pregnancy centers in third world countries. Again, where the USAID will be promoting abortion, will be paying for abortions. We want to be there in local crisis pregnancy centers with ultrasound machines, which help women in third world countries to see that when they're pregnant, they're carrying a child. And if you see a picture of the child, in Nigeria, we have evidence that if a Nigerian woman is shown an ultrasound picture of her unborn child, and she's considering abortion prior to that time, and she sees the picture, 97% will choose life. Very few will actually go through with an abortion. So ultrasounds are a vital tool in fighting the rampant abortion promotion we're going to see at home and abroad. And getting state legislatures involved. We have the state legislature, for example, in Montana, just passing 4 pieces of legislation recently that were signed into law by the governor of Montana, mandating ultrasounds, a waiting period, forbidding sex selection, abortion, and so forth. We also have just the last day or two, we have a new order in North Dakota saying to the attorney general of that state that every executive order coming from the pen of Joe Biden should be examined to see if it conforms to the laws of the United States of America and the laws of the state of North Dakota. I think that will slow down a lot of these really illegal executive actions that Biden is trying to take with a pen and a piece of paper.
Well, while the anti-Trump drumbeat was so strong during the past 4 years, almost incessantly, a lot of work was being done on the ground. And one proof of that is the baker's dozen of new members of Congress, of the House, who are pro-life. And the advancing number of Republicans versus Democrats in that body, which must have terrified Nancy Pelosi, and which I believe is a reason for a lot of her shredding of the Constitution and the rules of the House with regard to how to go forward. You might recall the last time that a Democrat occupied the White House and both houses of Capitol Hill. The last two times, in 2010 and 1994, a total of 120 new members, Republican members of the House, 54, I believe, and 65 in both years, were gained by the Republicans. And in the Senate, 6 and 8, respectively, in those two off-year elections, 2010 and 1994. Nancy Pelosi sees that train coming down the track, and as Jesse Helms used to say, she can smell the diesel fuel, and she is responding with every arrow in her quiver to make that not happen. We have that momentum on the ground because these are local elections inside of various states that are often overlooked, ignored, not by the left and not anymore. They're pouring money into them, and that's one place where if those who are politically minded are looking for a bright light, take a look at their congressional districts, which a good 20% of them are swing districts that are now occupied by pro-abortion representatives who can be defeated with a change of only 5 or 6% of the vote.
I think that's why they're going full speed forward, of course, with their pro-abortion agenda, because they realize that the clock is ticking. The American people are already becoming dissatisfied with the anti-life, anti-family actions of the Biden administration. We're only a couple of weeks into the administration. His approval rating is far below what Trump's was at this point in Trump's presidency. And it's only, I think, going to go lower because these are deeply unpopular things. And I can't imagine anything more unpopular than forcing Americans to pay for abortions of fellow unborn Americans, which is what we're talking about when we talk about doing away with the Hyde Amendment, named after the great Henry Hyde. The left is now has the Hyde Amendment in their sights, and they want to do away with it, which would funnel our tax dollars to Planned Parenthood and other abortion clinics for the direct payment of the taking of the lives of unborn children. Now, I will say that Senator Daines from Montana has just sent a letter to the president and to Chuck Schumer, signed by 48 Republicans. All the Republicans signed it except, I think, Lisa Murkowski and Susan of Alaska, who is pro-abortion, and Susan Collins of Maine, who is pro-abortion. 48 Republicans signed it, saying that they would absolutely oppose any effort to legislatively do away with the Hyde Amendment. Now, that, of course, is only effective as long as we have the filibuster in place. And the only thing protecting the filibuster right now is the statement by the West Virginia Senator, Joe Manchin, a Democrat, but a Catholic, and the Arizona Senator, Kristen Sinema, saying they will not support overturning the filibuster, which would allow Kamala Harris to cast the deciding vote in the Senate 51-50 on a party line vote. And the Democrats would be able to run roughshod over pass any legislation they wanted. So these are perilous times for the unborn.
When you
The Hyde
call it,
Amendment is in the crosshairs, and it looks like we can stop it, but everybody needs to be on the alert to the fact that the Democrats, through administrative action, through legislative action, if they can get things through the House and the Senate, and through the courts, are going to advance their agenda as much as their anti-life agenda as much as they can over the next couple of years.
well, Niccolo Machiavelli has set the pattern for hundreds of years of tyrants. And one of his rules in book 15 of The Prince, as I recall, very popular, if a ruler has to choose between being feared and being loved and cannot be both, he must choose to be feared. And secondly, in book 8, he talks about how evils, you talk about unpopular things, let's call them by their proper name, they're evil. These are evil initiatives and evil acts that are being funded and propounded here. He said that evils must be done all at once, swiftly and all at once, and good things, gentle and productive acts of the prince can be sorted out and accorded over time to keep people happy, but do all your evil things at once. I think that from what I can tell, the Biden administration is interested in taking the first half of that seriously. Do all your evil at once. But I don't think they're going to stop. I think they're going to let the second half of that admonition go, and they're going to keep this up as long as they can, because as you point out, they do have only a short period of time. And it's either going to be one that allows them to reverse, to make irreversible, frankly, the constitutional process with massive mail-in voting and immigration that's illegal and yet voting and all the rest. And this is their only chance. I think that they've chosen that this is going to be the time. They don't have many chances. This is the one they've chosen to take. That fence is going to stay downtown, and it's a symbol of their desire to dominate permanently. In my view, that's what they've got in mind.
It's a bizarre thing to see in the United States of America, a wall that reminds me of, I don't know, the Berlin Wall dividing free West Berlin from communist East Berlin, a wall dividing the capital of the United States from the American people. At the same time that we're tearing down, not tearing down, but stopping construction of the wall on the southern border and literally inviting people from all around the world to come over our porous southern border, we're building a wall around the capital of the United States where our elected representatives supposedly pass legislation to advance our interest. I think nothing symbolically speaks louder than that wall topped by concertina wire, which is designed to cut anyone to pieces who tries to climb over that 10-foot wall. I think that represents a divide between the party in power in Washington now and the American people. And I hope that we, being a people of faith and a people of prayer, will pray for our country on a daily basis. We'll pray for our leaders on a daily basis, both those who are pro-life and those who are pro-abortion. No one is beyond redemption. No one is beyond salvation. And at the same time, of course, we need to be actively involved in supporting pro-life efforts at the local level, at the national level, at the international level, so that we can help to minimize the damage that the abortion movement is going to be able to do to unborn children over the next couple of years. Every life we can save is worth, I think, the entire material universe. because
Amen.
every life, every human life is created in the image and likeness of God, and every human soul will go to be with the Father at the end of their time on earth, should they make the right choices while they're here. So we need to pray for the salvation of souls. We need to pray for unborn children, and we need to work, I think, very, very hard over the next 2 years to help mitigate this evil.
Well, that's a very useful admonition and petition. And it's also a prayer is an excellent way to go forward. Thanks for joining us, Steve. I ask those who are watching to come back and join us at News and Views from PRI. In our next program, there's a lot going on and a lot of folks want to understand it. And that's what we're here to probe and to investigate and discuss for you. So thank you, Steve, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Chris Mannion, signing off.